Great evening, everyone. Welcome to your fourth Wednesday night leadership lessons from the Leader's Lens. I'm Dr. Ray Johnson. I'm happy to be the senior pastor here in the Walk of Dominion. But on fourth Wednesday nights all throughout this year, I want to spend some time talking with us about leadership lessons learned along the way. That's right, leadership lessons learned along the way. And I'm titling this year, Leadership Lessons from the Leader's Lens. Whether you know it or not, my friends, each and every one of us, we have some leadership ability. So I want to make sure that you tune in and plug in on fourth Wednesday nights all throughout this year, as we'll spend some time talking through some conversations of lessons to us really from the perspective of the leader's lens. Listen, we're not going to waste a whole lot of time. Let's deep dive and jump right on in to tonight's discussion. So listen, our leadership gatherings, as you know already, are designed to help us develop, discern, and provide what I call deliverables in our context of ministry. And really, that's designed for us to be able to gain momentum and manage and sustain momentum. You know, a lot of times as leaders, when we're leading organizations, whether we're leading nonprofits or corporate conglomerates, or whether we're working as middle managers or supervisors or senior level leaders on our jobs, one of the things that we really try to focus in on per our organization in terms of deliverables is how do we gain momentum? That can be in terms of the product and sale of a sale of a product, or product and sale of a service that we provide, gaining momentum, gathering and garnering support in terms of the market. But one of the things that's critically important is not so much that you gain the momentum, but that you sustain the momentum. And a lot of times we can start new projects and start new things, right on down to cleaning out the closet at the house, or looking at how do I clean this section of the room. We'll start and we'll stop, and we'll start and we'll stop. And what I want to help us to understand is that gaining momentum is really about sustaining momentum. Can you put the steps in place to not only gain it, but also sustain it? And so I'm glad that you're taking time to tune in with us on tonight. And so listen, whether we recognize it or not, let me make this a little bit larger on the screen so we can see it. So whether we recognize it or know it at all, all of us have some leadership ability. The old adage phrase and question is, are leaders born or are leaders made? And so the answer is both. Leaders are born and leaders are made. If we subscribe to John Maxwell, you know, there have been a lot of people who've had a lot of thought and a lot of thinking when it comes to the areas of leadership. If we subscribe to John Maxwell's leadership is influence, then there are many people born with a natural ability to influence others through charisma and personality traits. My question to that one is, if we say that leadership is influence, not everybody is born with the same level of charisma. Not everybody has the same level of what I would call the personality trait ingredients that make up what we would call and what we would say today or know today as to be charismatic, influential leaders. If we subscribe to the thinking of Sam Chan, another leadership guru of our time, particularly in the nonprofit or inside of the four-walled sacred space of the church, leaders are developed. He says this: leaders are developed over time through the attainment of skills to enhance their God-given or developed abilities, we would say. And then there is, of course, one of my favorites, Dr. Miles Monroe, the late Miles Monroe. He said he defined leadership as the ability to inspire others through a vision, passion, and sense of purpose. You know, Dr. Monroe talked everything about purpose. And, you know, I often say things this way, that its purpose is important, that we do things on purpose, for purpose, and by purpose. Now, consider this with me just for a few moments. He believed that leadership is critical and that it transforms people. He believed leadership should produce a change in not only others, but also in you as the individual. Real leadership really begins first with you. Change, I should say, or transformation really first begins with you. When I say that's a leadership lesson learned along the way, I really mean that every change that is taking place in my own personal life, in the life of my ministry, in the life of my nonprofits and business entities. Everything begins with you, the individual, you, the person. And so I'm going to start with some of that a little bit later on tonight, but it's going to make a whole lot more sense to us as we go along with this. So let's talk about this for a minute. The reality is it takes a little bit of all of the previous definitions to cultivate leadership in your own life. It takes an enhancement in skills, abilities to influence others. Charisma can be cultivated to produce change. And the greatest in all of these is the ability to produce change with you to lead you. Let me say that again. The greatest change in all of these is the ability to produce the necessary change to not only lead, but to lead you. And I often say a lot of times we look out of ourselves so much for looking at opportunities for how we're going to begin to lead change in different dynamics. Like I mentioned before, whether it's a new design at home in the yard, or starting a new entity, or finishing and writing the book, accomplishing a new degree program, setting the trajectory of raising that child on the right pathway that they should go in their lives. All of that first begins with your ability to lead yourself before you can begin to lead others. And a critical key to change and transformation within is, that's right, the leader's attitude. A critical component part for that is the leader's attitude. And so tonight we're going to spend some time talking about the lessons of leadership and the lens of the leader as it relates to the leader's own attitude. Let's get into this. See, one of the most difficult things to control or to influence or to predict is the environment of change. All of us as individuals, all of us as people, we want to be able to control the dynamic of the environment that we find ourselves in. And one of the things that we cannot control is really sometimes the environment. I mean, you can manage your solitude, you can manage the peacefulness of the environment that you're in. But in this chaotic world, there is so much that's going on all around us. We don't know what's coming next. I mean, we've got airplanes falling out of the sky, boats running into bridges, people all of a sudden changing their mind that you thought you could depend on. Things are flip-flopping up and down. Even when it comes to the religious sphere of theology, there's so much kind of being inculcated inside of the context of what we know to be truth, that now truth has become so relative to where we are that pluralism is really beginning to rule the day. In other words, what's true for you may not necessarily be true for me, and what's true for me may not be necessarily true for you. I know this isn't Bible study, but I just got to pin pause there just for a second and to remind us that we know that according to who the person of Jesus, who is the Christ, is, he is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. And all truth is really based upon being oriented around who he is. He is the litmus test and the standard for truth. So I don't want you to buy into this post-Christian world and this post-Christian concept of how we determine truth. We measure that by who Jesus is as written inside of his word. Now, let me get out of that and talk right back into some leadership just for a moment. Here is how companies generally feel. Let me make this a little bit larger on the screen about change, how companies generally feel about change. Look at this. Look at the far left screen here. It says, company must learn, the leader is saying, the director, board of director, the CEO, the leader is saying to people, company must learn to embrace change. Now check out all the employees. They say, uh-oh, it's another management fad. They're talking among themselves. Will it quickly pass, or will it linger like the stench of a dead woodchuck under the porch? Now watch the leader here. He says, I think we should do a change newsletter. And all of a sudden, all of the staff in line around the leader go, woodchuck, 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 woodchuck. A lot of times, this is how we view the idea of change. Why? Because we're creatures of habit. Once we find something in a particular way, we're excited with the way that it is, and it's comfortable for us. Why is it comfortable for us? Because it doesn't require us to make any necessary changes. We become creatures of habits. You know, some of us, we live by the adage phrase of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I know I happen to be one of those people. If it's not broken, why are we even messing with it? But sometimes things can go on so long in a certain way for a certain amount of time that we get so comfortable with it that we don't even realize that we're in a place of stagnation. And whatever is not growing, if it's stagnant, eventually it will die. Come on, let me get back into some more of this on tonight. So, see, the reality is that the lens through which we see creates our reality. When you looked at those employees, they kept thinking to themselves, here we go with another management fad, another idea that will blow in and blow out. It will have no bearing on the impact of our day-to-day, here it is, quote unquote, routines. Can I ask you a quick question? What are the routines in your life that have become so mundane that you haven't even thought about bringing about a change? Or you think to yourself, change is too difficult, change is too hard, it's going to require too much from me, or it's really never going to work out and it's always going to be like this. It's going to end up coming right back to where things were before I even started. So why even waste my time getting into this? Woodchuck, woodchuck, woodchuck. Here it is again. See, the reality is the lens through which we see creates our reality. The lens through which we see creates our reality. Now, this is something I want us to take a real quick look at, if you will, when it comes to navigating and managing change. This is the Kubler-Ross model of change. Notice on the far left side of the quadrant, let me just take a look at all the ends of this here. It has to do with morale on the far left and competence. That's one measure. Another one is time. So when we start to look at the ebbs and flows of the morale and competence that's necessary for changing things in our lives and the amount of time that it will take, this is the cycle that we end up finding ourselves in when change happens to us in our life. Especially when it comes to unexpected change. Let me just take a few minutes with this here. Unexpected change are things that are surprises. You never thought that you would experience a DEI loss of a job, or you never thought that you would experience the current administrations for those of you who are remote employees or were teleworking, that all of a sudden you got to go back to the office. And now all of a sudden the winds of change start blowing, and now there's a greater demand in terms of the productivity of the job. You never thought that the interest rates would go up as high as they did a couple of years ago to be able to afford goods and services and consumer goods and consumer products. You never thought that car payments would be where they are, or house payments would be where they are. You never really thought that education was going to cost this much. You didn't see the divorce coming. You never thought that the teenager would experience with drugs or alternative lifestyles. Matter of fact, you've been in church all your life. No way in the world would there be so much scandal inside of the four walls, from the pews to the pulpit and from the pulpit back to the pews. You never saw it coming. You never thought that there would be the kind of violence that we see in our world today, where people have such a lawlessness and such a carefree attitude about life itself. You never thought we would be in these kind of times, not now, not here in the West, not where I live, not on my street. Never thought that change would happen this way. Where when we start to look at that kind of change happening this way, all of a sudden, what Kubler and Ross give us is a model of how we handle the change. See, in this first quadrant here on the left, there is first shock. Never thought it would happen. And then there is denial. There's a disbelief, looking for evidence that this isn't true. A lot of us can spend the lion's share of our time as leaders with, I can't believe that this just happened. This did not just take place the way that it took place. I can't believe the behavior and the decisions of people are the way that they are. How in the world did I end up right here? Then there is the big one for me. I don't know about you, Once you get past denial, frustration then sets in. Frustration is the recognition that things are different. Sometimes what comes with frustration, because things are different, is anger. Anger all of a sudden gets set in. Watch this one. Depression happens as a result of the frustration and the anger, where we have a low mood about our mood swings begin to drop and we begin to go down into the eps way before there's a flow, where we lack energy of what it takes to change and to bring about change. Let me talk to people who haven't necessarily come to terms with the swings between anger and frustration. I want to simply say to you that you are right where you are. The times are right what they are. You are experiencing right what you're experiencing, but it doesn't have to remain that way, because the only thing that is certain about change is change itself. Now watch this. Then all of a sudden, when you start to come up into the flows, experiment. This is the initial engagement with the new situation. When you start looking up a little bit, and when you start to look up a little bit, you got some decisions you've got to make. Learning how to work in the new situation, you start to feel a little bit more positive. And then once you get there, then there's the moment of integration, where change is integrated to produce a new experience or a new situation and scenario or a new you. Sometimes the change that's needed is change within you before you can ever change the situation. And a key to changing that situation is first the attitude in terms of how you see it, in terms of how you experience it, in order for that change to end up taking place. This is why today our focus is on navigating the change in our attitude while dealing with the top three: frustration, depression, and the experiment of beginning to establish and try something new. This is why I happen to say to us, as I've walked through many of these processes my own self, today I want to talk to us the lessons learned along the way. Let's keep going right on into some of this. So again, let's examine this just a little bit closer. Most of us, when it comes to managing and navigating the process of change where our attitudes are concerned, where some of us may still be in the quadrant of the area of denial. This really is not happening. This is really not my reality. I want to say to you, yes, it is. This really is happening. This really is your reality. And at some point, you got to come to terms with it and bring about any kind of change with it. I don't know why. Something is just pushing right through here on that. But you got to get into a place where you recognize that this really is taking place. This really is happening. Things are really happening the way that they are happening right now. You got to come to a moment where you really come to terms with it. You got to get away from the denial, move through the frustration, the depression, and start to get to that new part of the experiment. So listen, when it comes to the leader's lens and the leader's attitude as regards to their lens, consciously or unconsciously, we are creating the results that lie ahead. Direct reports obviously bring perspectives and answers. However, it is the lens through which the leader experiences their world that colors the true outcomes. It is the lens through which the leader experiences their world. You determine how you see what it is that you see, because leaders are expected to have answers and solutions. And as leaders, we must thus also believe we do. I got to say to you on tonight, everything you need is already within, depending upon your lens. So having said that on today, what happens when a leader is not aware of the mindset and thus the lens through which his or her world is experienced? The impact can be significant. The difference is significant. The difference, it determines the difference between growth and stagnation. How you see it determines, are you going to grow through this or are you just going to simply go through this? You ought to put that in the chat. Am I going through this, or am I growing through this? And change demands growth from each and every one of us. How am I changing in the midst of this? How am I growing through this? Come on, let's roll into this. So my question for us tonight is, how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm going to say it early, as a victim? Do you see yourself as a victor? Or do you see yourself that this is another opportunity to grow? There's vibrancy here to determine how you handle the change. I want you to just kind of stay with me for a minute, and I want you to just check this out in terms of this video for tonight, because it has everything to do in terms of an impact of how we see ourselves in order to produce change. Take a quick look at this.
Self is not optional as a leader if you want to be an effective one. If you had told me when I was hospitalized in 2007 because of the deepest depression I'd ever have in my life that something positive would come out of it, I would have laughed at you if I could have laughed at that point in my life. I was in a bad place, but overcoming it has transformed my career.
This is Stand Together Presents stories, ideas, and advice from changemakers tackling our biggest challenges.
My name's Greg Lukianoff. I'm the president and CEO of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. I'm the co-author of Coddling of the American Mind and next Canceling of the American Mind, because I'm very creative with my titles. It sounded kind of selfish to me at first to think that I had to get help, that I had to take time to overcome the deep, deep depression that I was in. But I started thinking to myself, am I good for this organization? I think I am. This is my life's calling. And once you recognize that, you realize that you have to take care of yourself too. And believe me, most of your staff is going to understand that as well. They want the boss to actually have their head together. They want them to be okay. Being honest about how much I struggled has actually forged connections with me and my staff that I wasn't expecting, and really deep ones as well. You know, being vulnerable all the time, maybe that's excessive for a leader, but showing some vulnerability can actually be the thing that helps you understand each other as people. One of the real benefits is how it freed people up to be more of themselves. And when people are more of themselves, they get more creative, they get more invested, and they feel more seen.
Wow. When people are free to be more of themselves, they get more vested and they become more free. This is why I'm asking you the question tonight. How do you see yourself? How do you process through the surprise of change in your life? See, how we see ourselves, let's look at this. How we see ourselves is critically important to the healing process that he was talking about. Let me make this a little bit larger on the screen again, because I want you to be able to see this. How we see ourselves is critically important to the healing process. When we're in this second wave of our graph, depression, it's tough to get out without internal healing. When you're in the I've moved from shock and denial to now anger to now depression. If you don't take time to heal about the experiences that you found yourself in, it'll be difficult for you to begin to start to move up the graph with new experiences and creating what I'm getting ready to talk about in terms of strategies. See, one of the most common mistakes made is pretending that what's taking place is not taking place. If anybody can talk to us about that one, I know that I certainly can, because I would never in my wildest dreams would believe that I experienced what I experienced 7, 8, or 9 years ago. But now watch this. I want you to see something really, really clear. We must learn to accept the event without internalizing it. We must learn to accept the situation without victimizing it or treating ourselves as if we ourselves are the victim. And check out this next one. We must also understand that both of these keep us from the most important one, and that is strategizing. It keeps us from developing the necessary strategies we need to be able to get out of where we are. See, we need to understand that what we need is a strategy to win. What we need to win is a strategy. We can't start on the way up, coming out of this depression for a new experience without having first a strategy. And this begins with our attitude as leaders. So how you see yourself becomes a projection to the world around you and becomes a reflection to you about you in the world around you. In other words, how you see yourself is how other people are going to see you. Are you projecting out the kind of image that you want the world to see about you? And it first begins in you before anybody else will ever see it on you, if I could say it that way, like that. See, this is critically important. It's so important that I want you to take the next 30 days as we get ready to move into the Lent season. And I want you to start focusing in on, how am I seeing myself? Let me make it large on the screen. This is the homework I want you to deep dive into. I want you to start categorizing how you see you in the world around you. I want you to take a straw poll, and I want you to include people you can trust. And I want you to get their opinions about how do they think you see you versus how you see you. And I want you to determine where you are on this graph toward change. I want you to determine, are you still here in denial? Are you in frustration? Are you still dealing with depression? Have you gotten to a point where you are on the way up? Are you actually in the land of decision, or are you integrating the new strategy in for winning? See, tonight has been leadership lessons from the leader's lens. I like to say it this way. It's been lessons that I've learned along the way. And I hope that this has been helpful for you tonight. I'll see you again with a whole lot more of this on March the 26th. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you share this with somebody. Take care. God bless you tonight. Bye-bye.